Have you ever heard of a town called Barrows Deep? Probably not. It's not on any map you'll find, tucked away in a valley so remote it seems to have been forgotten by time itself. I found it by accident, my car breaking down on a nameless road that wasn't supposed to exist. The people were quiet, polite, but with a tension in their eyes that I couldn't quite place. They offered me a room at the local inn, the only one in town, and told me my car would be fixed by morning. As the sun began to dip below the jagged peaks surrounding the valley, a strange stillness fell over Barrows Deep. Shopkeepers started closing up early. Parents called their children inside, and the friendly smiles I'd seen earlier were replaced with tight-lipped urgency. I asked the innkeeper, a weathered man named Silas, what was going on. He just shook his head, his knuckles white as he polished a glass. Just a local custom, son. You'll want to be inside before the siren. The siren? Before I could ask more, a low, mournful wail echoed through the valley. It wasn't like a fire alarm or an ambulance. It was a deep, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. The effect was immediate. The last few stragglers on the street practically sprinted for their doors. I saw a woman drop her grocery bag, spilling apples across the cobblestones, but she didn't stop. She slammed her door shut, and I heard the heavy thud of a bolt sliding into place. Silas gestured frantically towards my room. Go on now. Lock your door, and whatever you do, don't look out the window. Not until you hear the morning bell. His voice was a strained whisper, filled with a genuine fear that sent a chill down my spine. I did as he said, feeling foolish but unnerved. I went to my second-floor room, the scent of dust and old wood thick in the air. I locked the door and then, out of habit, drew the heavy curtains across the window. The town outside fell completely silent. The only sound was the fading echo of that awful siren. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding. What could possibly cause an entire town to react like this? Was it a wild animal? Some kind of local drill? My reporter's curiosity began to fight with the primal fear that had taken root in my gut. I told myself it was ridiculous. I was a grown man, not a child afraid of the dark. After what felt like an eternity, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know. I crept to the window, my hands trembling slightly, as I pulled the curtain back just a fraction of an inch. At first I saw nothing. The street below was empty, bathed in the pale, eerie light of a full moon. The spilled apples were still there, gleaming like red jewels on the dark stones. It seemed peaceful, almost beautiful. I almost laughed at myself for being so spooked. Then I saw it. A shadow detached itself from the base of a lamp-post. It wasn't a trick of the light. The shadow was long and thin, like a person's, but the lamp-post cast its own separate shadow in the opposite direction. This new shadow moved. It slithered across the street, independent of any object, its form distorting and stretching in ways that were physically impossible. It wasn't a shadow. It was the absence of light, a moving patch of pure blackness. My breath caught in my throat. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as more of them appeared. They flowed from alleyways, peeled themselves from the sides of buildings, and rose from the very cobblestones. They had no features, no substance, but they moved with a clear, terrifying purpose. They drifted through the streets, sometimes pausing to twitch and contort, their edges rippling like dark water. They were searching. One of them glided over to the spilled apples. It paused, and its form seemed to consume them. The apples didn't move. They just vanished as the patch of blackness passed over them, leaving nothing behind. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. These things weren't just shadows. They were predators, and the entire town was their hunting ground. Suddenly a sound broke the silence. A metallic click, followed by the creak of a door. My eyes darted to a house across the street. The front door was slightly ajar. I couldn't believe it. Who would be foolish enough to go outside? A young man, probably no older than 18, slipped out. He looked nervous, glancing up and down the street before making a break for the house next door. I remembered seeing him earlier, laughing with a girl who lived there. A secret late-night visit, a fatal mistake. He hadn't taken 3 steps before the shadows reacted. They stopped their aimless wandering and converged on him with silent, impossible speed. It was like watching ink spill across a page. They flowed towards him from every direction. The boy froze, his face a mask of pure terror as he realized what was happening. He opened his mouth to scream, but before any sound could escape, the first shadow reached him. It touched his shoe, and his foot simply ceased to exist. Not eaten, not torn, just gone. He stumbled, and the others were on him. They washed over him like a silent black tide. There was no struggle, no blood, no sound at all. In less than a second, where a terrified young man had stood, there was only the empty cobblestone street. The shadows swirled for a moment where he had been, then separated, resuming their slow, patient patrol. I stumbled back from the window, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a scream. My body was shaking uncontrollably. Now I understood. I understood the fear in Silas's eyes, the desperate urgency of the townspeople. The rule wasn't a custom. It was the only law that mattered. Stay inside, lock your doors, because the things that hunt in the night in Barrows Deep don't leave any evidence. I spent the rest of the night huddled in the corner of the room, as far from the window as possible, listening to the terrifying silence outside, my imagination filling it with the whisper-soft slide of those things moving through the streets. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every creak of the old inn made me jump. The first rays of dawn were heralded by a cheerful, clear bell ringing from the church tower. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Slowly, cautiously, I heard the sounds of life returning, doors unbolting, voices in the street. I dared to peek outside again. The street was normal. A woman was sweeping her stoop. A baker was opening his shop. The spilled apples were gone. The boy's house and the girl's house stood silent. No one looked at his door. No one mentioned his name. When I went downstairs, Silas was behind the counter, a fresh pot of coffee brewing. He looked at me, and his eyes were full of a sad, knowing pity. He saw the terror still etched on my face. "Your car's all fixed," he said quietly. The mechanic left the keys on the counter. "It's ready to go." He didn't ask if I'd slept well. He didn't ask what I had seen. He knew. I didn't say a word. I grabbed the keys, left more than enough cash on the counter to cover my room, and walked out into the morning sun. No one said goodbye. As I drove away, I didn't look back. I drove for hours, not stopping until Barrows Deep was hundreds of miles behind me. Sometimes when the sun sets and the shadows start to get long, I think about that town. I think about the things that move on their own, and I think about the people who break the rules, the ones who are never, ever spoken of again. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe for more stories from the dark.